Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
Welcome to Why I Believe. My name is Rick Starr. If you have ever wanted to know how to live in the wild and live on wild edibles, we have a wonderful couple here today, Ezekiel and Pauline Sanchez, here in Mesa, Arizona. They own a foundation called the Anasazi Foundation, which helps youth discover who they are and what they can become. And you have a wonderful journey and a story behind your travel, your journey toward the gospel and toward meeting each other and the things that you do in life that help others. And so we're excited to hear about your story. Thanks so much for being here on Why I Believe with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's begin with you, Ezekiel. You are from a Mexican Indian tribe, the Totonaca. Did I say that correctly?
That is correct. Yeah.
And you started an interesting journey to the gospel. Please share with us the story of your youth and your upbringing and the skills that you learned in the wild, which are interesting, very interesting. How were you brought up?
Well, I come from a family of 16 children. Mm-hmm. There was 8 boys and 8 girls. When my father died, Mom and him had been married 63 years. I always say when I grow up, I want to be like my father. My father didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't swear, and he was always faithful to Mom. My mother was Pentecostal because of her parents' upbringing. My father had been an orphan when he was small, and so he was a Catholic by name only. Mm-hmm. But my mother, obedient, followed my father's Catholic, religion. But I want to start back in a little mining town called Musquis in Mexico. Mm-hmm. This little mining town was where my father worked as a coal miner. And I was born in Musquis, in the little mining town of Musquis. And my grandma and my grandfather, Maria and Jose Cadena, they lived in Sabinas, Coahuila, which is about maybe 30 miles from there. Mm-hmm. When I was born, there was a little discussion between my mom and my dad what I should be named, and my mother wanted to name me, give me her grandfather's name. My father, who had been left an orphan when he was about 7 or 8, wanted me to carry his father's name. Mm-hmm. My grandmother, unbeknownst to them, had traveled on the train and had come quite a distance on foot. The train only went so far. And came and asked if I had been named. And they said, no, we can't decide which grandfather to name him. And my grandmother said, no, that's not his name. I've come to tell you that he's supposed to be named Ezekiel because this is a special child and he's going to do a lot of good in the world. Well, can you imagine a young mother hearing that? And so I grew up with my mother reminding me that I was a special boy. Mm-hmm. And that's why God had named me Ezekiel. And so sometime later, when I was 4 years old, my father brought us on the cover of night into Texas. And we crossed the Rio Grande. Mm-hmm. And a rancher had hired my father. My father had gone before and had gone all the way up to Michigan and Indiana to work up there. And on his way back, met this rancher in Texas. And the rancher said, why don't you go and get your family and be the caretaker of this ranch, and I'll get you your green cards. So my father then made that deal with him and brought us across. So I was about 4 years old. There was nobody else on that ranch except for us. And so I grew up just playing with the lizards and wildlife. And of course we didn't have too much. And I remember the first few days, and the reason I remember them because it dealt with rattlesnakes. Mm-hmm. And this little place where this shelter or this home had boards for the floor, and the nuts had come loose, and the snakes would crawl up there through the holes
into the home,
so that they would avoid the morning dew, and they'll be dry. Well, I remember that first night we got up and found out there's a couple of snakes in there. My father just took a shovel, put them outside, and then he took the lids off the pinto bean cans, and he nailed them down. He nailed the holes up, so no more snakes would come into the holes. And then he built just to be sure, about 3 feet high, he built some boards against the wall, and he put some hay there, and the only covering we had was gunny sacks. To cover us at night.
To cover you at night.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's how we started. But I tell you, my mom and dad were really happy, especially my mom, because she had a stove, and she had, a sink, and she had a bed. There was one bed there, and so it was like a mansion to her.
Now, you mentioned there were 16 children in your family.
Yes, but only 4 of us 3.
Okay.
3. Yeah, 2 sisters, 1 older sister, and myself, and then a younger sister.
But very humble beginnings, but you say your mom was very happy.
Oh, yes,
very
because compared to what she had in Mexico.
Yeah.
While we were at that ranch, the rancher would bring us table foods once a month. And then when we needed something, we'd supplement living off the land. And so my father and mother knew a lot about the wild edibles and medicinal plants. And so in the morning I would head out with instructions from my mother, and I would bring back some wild edibles, and she would mix them with eggs and onions. And boy, that was a scrumptious meal. And today I say, if you put eggs in anything, I can eat it. But
what kind of plants are we talking about that you would add?
There's a weed that grows in your backyards, even here, called purslane. Okay, and we call it verdolaga. And I used to go gather. That is full of vitamins and all wonderful things,
And it just grows wild.
It goes wild, yeah. And so we used to bring armloads of that and cook it. My mother would put a little oil in the pan and put some onions in there, and then put the verdolaga after she washed it, and just add eggs to it, and it was the most delicious meal. The other thing we used to go and also collect was the green pads of the prickle pear cactus, and bring them in and take all the spines off. And we also used to cook. My mother used to cook them in there. I know most of the recipes for all those. Also, the tunas, the fruit of the prickle pear, when they were ripe, we used to collect them, put them in a bucket, so that whenever we need something sweet, we'd go in there and
that would be like your candy, like your treat.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And, there was always a way to collect the wild edibles, like the prickle pear fruit. Once it turns purple, it's ripe. And you just don't go down there and just grab it, and pull it off, because it's got like invisible little spines, and they go all over your fingers. Well, my mother used to go and collect branches of the mesquite tree, make like a little feather duster, and then she'd go and hit them, and all the little spines fall off, and then she'd just grab with her hand, twist it off, put them in a bucket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So everything had a way of being able to gather the wild edible. For instance, the mesquite tree that grows here, it's prevalent.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's a medicinal plant also, along with being edible, and useful in many ways. Sometimes I get what you call maybe fungus, or what's the other word to say that? And my foot would have athlete's. How do I can pronounce it?
Athlete's feet.
Athlete's foot, or
a
fungus?
Yeah, fungus. Well, my mother used to go and take some of the root of the mesquite, take the bark off, the membrane inside, the soft white, and then the leaves. And she would make a tea in a big pot, and we would put our feet in there, and by morning everything was gone.
Really?
Yeah. So we grew up knowing that nature was like Walmart. If you had a guide, you could usually find something.
Something to eat, or something to take care
medicinal.
of yourself.
Well, I'll tell you how much they knew and why we were so comfortable in being there with them in that area. And it was pretty desolate. One day, one winter, it got pretty rough on the cattle. And the ranchers found out that if you burn the spines of the prickle pear cactus, the cattle will survive. They'll eat that. Well, they had figured an apparatus to be able to, like a long pipe with a flame at the end, a burner at the end, and they connected like the butane tank. They would open it up, pump it and open it up, and then they would light it, and it'd be like a little torch.
They burn off the spines of the prickly pear.
Yeah. Well, this was a very hard winter, and the rancher brought another man to help my father. And they went out that morning to burn the prigs off the cactus. And my father was adjusting his tank. The other man he was already burning. And my dad's tank exploded and it bait him with the liquid from the waste up, all up in the head. And when the man heard the big noise, the big boom, he turned around with the flame in arm, and my father lit up. And so my father is walking a small trail, a cow trail, back to the house. He's got a Levi jacket over his head, and we think that he's playing a kukui or the boogeyman because he used to play that.
Kind of a joke on your family.
Yeah. And so we ran thinking he's going to play with us, and he said, "No, stay away, children," And we knew something was wrong, so he went up the porch into the house, and my sisters immediately went to the wall of the house, which had all kinds of nuts that had been fallen out, and they looked through there, and when my father took the jacket off, they started to cry. Well, I was not very tall, so I was trying to find a nut I could look into, one of the holes, and by the time I found one, my mother called me, and I went obedient to the porch, and I knew something terribly had happened to Dad, and I haven't seen him burn yet. And my mother told me, "Go, son, and get me this particular plants." She told me, "Don't come back till you get them as much as you can." So I left. And when I came back, then my mother made a poultice.
A poultice?
Yes. And she anointed my father every day and night. Well, when my father died, and he was 87 years old, nobody knew he had been burned. And he was burned the face, the ears, the neck, the arms, and everything.
So that healed his skin from scar tissue.
No scar tissue whatsoever. Well, living with that kind of parents who had that knowledge about the land, obviously we were very comfortable. Well, I didn't even know I was poor until I got to BYU. When I start telling this story, people say, "Oh, you were so poor." But we never knew we were poor because we had everything we needed.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so it was wonderful growing up like that.
Well, we need to touch on that story of how you got to BYU. That's a really interesting story because you went from that limited education background to BYU, and eventually you used those skills at BYU in a great program. So talk about that journey in your life.
Well, thank you. With having one kid after another is just like rabbits. It seems to us like every 3 months a little guy would appear. 16 kids, eventually. But anyway, so my father was told by someone that if he went up north and worked in the migrant fields, he could make a lot of money with this large family. Well, my father had been up before, so he knew what he was getting into with his family. And the rancher who had promised our green cards did not come through with the green cards. So my father had sought employment the next ranch over, and this is the McCollin Ranch. And I say the McCollin Ranch because that ranch still exists today, so you can check and verify that my story is true. And the man that runs it now is the son of the owner. His name is Jimmy McCollin. And Jimmy and I have conversed since then. But we moved to the McCollin Ranch, and this man was able to get us our green cards. But we were like served slaves because he had a little store which we bought all our food. And then when he paid my father, he would just give him, says, "Fidel, you owe me this much, and here's what's left over." And we could never get ahead. Okay? We could never get ahead. But
you had your basic needs taken care of, but just enough to keep you there.
Yes. And so one day my father got a hold of one of his old friends who had gone up north with, and they said, "We'll come and pick you up." And he borrowed some money from them. So when my father went to announce to the rancher that we were going to head out, he said, "You can't, you owe me all this money." And my father said, "How much do I owe you?" He says, "This much." So my father took the money he had borrowed and paid him. And that rancher could not believe that. So we got into this canvas truck, big truck in there, put our little belongings, and we headed out. Day and night seems like it forever, it seems to me, until we reached Twin Falls, Idaho. And we were then ushered into the migrant camp there. They have it, and it's still there. And they gave us a little home. And this man that picked us up said, "Get your family ready because you start working tomorrow." And so we started thinning sugar beets with a short hole that the old timers called the devil's hole, because you were all day you were when bending on your back. And I tell you what, I dream about that ranch because that was hard work. I wanted to go back on those horses because I was about 5 when my dad put me in a horse, and I had tamed about 8, 9 horses already by the time I left. I was in my 14th year, and I thought this was just too much for us as children. And so for 5 years we traveled across the western United States. So we started in Idaho, and then we'd go up to Montana, and then up to the state of Washington, and then back to California, and then here I picked cotton here in Arizona, and then to Texas for the onions, and there was times that we made good money, but then we spend it along the way.
And your entire family was working, all your siblings?
Well, not all of them, because some of them were little, but most of the grown
as
ones.
many as could work.
Yes, and so, and we were good workers. We did good work because the farmers would recommend us to other farmers, that we were good workers. So I won't go into all that detail, just this much, because it's made me what I am today. And one of those things is that when we stop somewhere in a town to put gas in our car, sometimes they would not sell us gas. And so we're stranded in that town. And I was just a young buck, and so obviously, my hormones are popping, and I wanted to go and do something, burn the gas station down or something. But my father, who stood 5'4", would say, "Son, let God take care of it." He said, "We don't know what some of our people have done to this man, and he's seeing us as them, and he treats us that way." He said, "Let God take care of it." Well, I would fume and fuss, but okay. Well, the one where I really got upset was when we run the babies out of milk, and we're out of bologna and bread and red pop. We love that, and potato chips. And we'd stop, and people wouldn't sell us food. And so I began to develop a hatred for white people. Okay? I began to silently, I won't tell anybody, but silently, so when we were, for instance, one time we were in Payette, Idaho, and we were lined up to get tickets to go see a show in the little theater. There were some wonderful young people in the back, and they were laughing and joking with one another. And in my mind's eye, because of the experience that I've had, I thought they were laughing at me, poking fun at me. And so I turned around and I mistreated them very greatly, And so I knew something, I was getting something that was, and I knew what it was. It was this feeling that I was not as good as others, And at times, sometimes I think, why would God send me, as a Mexican? Why didn't He send me to be a white person so we could have nice cars and houses, Because even the farmers, when they put us up, when the wind blew, you could tell when it rained, we got wet, okay? Because they were not the most wealthy people in the world. Farmers are not. Yeah. But some of them were the kindness. And so that's what really saved me, is that the kindness of these farmers, And, of course, we also got mistreated by some, a few. One time we did a whole acreage of sugar beets, and the farmer would show up every day, every morning, and he had overalls and a big one of those jungle gym hats, and he always had something in his mouth, and he would spit out something great. Later I found out he would chew tobacco. But I would ask him, and I had very limited language, and so I say, "You like it at work?" And he would say, yep, good. And that was the extension of our conversation. So I tell my dad he likes our work, okay? But when it came to being paid, he said that he wasn't going to pay us, that the work was not good. And that was in Missoula, Montana. So my father, we drove up, and I was the interpreter. We went up to Missoula Sugar Factory. We told them. They sent a representative back with us. And I told him, I said, a police officer needs to come with us. I said, because the son of this farmer, he threatened us with a rifle. So here we come back, and there's a police car came with us, and we came in. They went out there with the farmer to check our work, and they said, this is the best work we'd ever seen before, because at sugar beets, the width of the hoe, you have to hit between the line of little plants, and you have to leave only one, so that when the bulb grows, see,
there's room for it to grow.
There's room for it to grow, but also if you leave two, the roots twist, and it doesn't become the bulb to produce the sugar that the farmer needs. Okay, and we had all left one single plant every 6 inches, the width of the hoe. And they said, "This is you need to pay him." And so his son was nowhere there, because we told him that your son was here with the rifle, and he denied it. But anyway, so he paid us, and we left. And that's when I started thinking. In my 19th year, and I said to my father, "We're not getting anywhere." And when I talked about it to others, the old people would say to me, "Oh, be quiet, don't rile up the youth." They said, "You were born to be a migrant worker, and you will die a migrant worker." And I thought to myself, "Well, this can't be my life," And I kept thinking about how in the world am I going to do some good working here. So I remember one afternoon in Missoula, Montana, we had thinned the sugar beets, and now they were growing up, ready to be harvested, and there was a lot of weeds, and before they harvest them, you had to go remove all the weeds. And we were weeding that particular field, and it rained on us. And of course, we don't stop what we're doing, and then you continue working, and the sun dries your clothes on your back, and then you get all itchy and hot and all the humid. I fell to the ground between one of the rows, and I was crying for the first time vocally. My father came up. He said, "Son, are you okay?" And I told him, I said, "Father, we're not getting anywhere here, the children. We need to get an education." I said, "I'm 19 years old." I said, "We're just like animals." I said, "We get up in the morning, have a big meal, and work till the sun goes down, and we can go home and get a big meal, and they wake up." I said, "For 5 years we'll be doing this." And he said, "Son, I know that." He says, "I'm going to look for a steady job, and the first job I find, all of you can go back to school." Well, he did. We landed in Nevada. He got a job milking cows with Anderson Dairy, and we all went to school. I went back to a little place called Overton, Nevada, and Grant Bowler was a principal there. At that time, I didn't know his name, but he was a principal. And I lied to him. He said, "What year are you?" And I said,
and you were 19 at that time.
And I was 19. So he let me in, and I'm sitting there with this 14-year-old freshman. But I was very young looking, and so nobody knew I was any older. Anyway, I don't want to give too many details, but Grant Bowler was quite a wonderful man. He was a member of the Mormon Church, and his son, Lynn Bowler, was my advisor. Well, when I went to study hall, was at the library, I didn't know how to read, so I had all these books, and I used to there listening, looking at them, and worse yet, what happened to me was when the teacher would speak, I could read his lips, and I could tell what he was telling, but when it turned to write on the board, he lost me.
Oh, I see.
And so I would go home at night, and I cry, and I said, the voices of the old men would come hunting me back, and where they say, "You were born to be a migrant worker, and you will die a migrant worker." And I thought to myself, I guess they're right. But in study hall, since I couldn't study, whoever sat next to me, I'd draw them. And they said, "Wow, that's a good likeness to me. Can I have it?" And I said, "Yeah, sign it." So I signed it. But one day I got called to the intercom to come to the principal's office. And you know how those kids are, "Oh, what did you do wrong?" And so I go down the hallway wondering, what did I do wrong? Grant Bowler standing there with this man that I'd seen before, but I never met him. He said, "This is Mr. Max Pennell. He's an art teacher." He said, and he says, and then they said, "Is this your drawings?" I wanted to lie, but my name was on it. And he said, he thinks you have enough talent. He said, instead of spending your time in study hall, he wants to know if you want to go take the art classes this hour with him.
Oh.
And I said, yes. So I worked into it was a new building that they had just built for the industrial arts. And they housed the art department there too. I walk in there and I smell the linseed oil and the turpentine and all the things that go with
artwork.
painting.
Uh-huh.
And I fell in love with that. That was my home, away from home. Mr. Benel, Max Benel was his name, was so kind. He was also LDS. And he would flatter me at times. He would say, "Oh, you sure you haven't taken art lessons before?"
Really?
And so he says, "Take this media home, do me a drawing." He says, "Come back." And so he tested me with charcoal, pastels, oils, watercolors, you name it. And I'd go and do whatever he wanted to and come back and he said, "Wow, this is pretty good." Well, what happened is that my father then found a better job in Las Vegas. And they moved. And I wanted to stay there because these people were so kind. I didn't know till later that I had landed in a Mormon community. Later I learned that the saints had been sent by Brigham Young to what they call the Upper Muddy. And they settled a town there, but then the Lake Mead came up and
Lake Mead, yeah.
yeah,
the dam was
and
built.
drowned the town. So they moved up higher and built Overton and Logandale, Nevada. And but I didn't know all those things yet, you know. But so Lynn Bowler, when he found out my family, that's about my advisor, son to Grant Bowler, he said, "You should stay here and go to school." I said, "I have no place." He said, "Well, we have a little basement, my wife and I. He says, it only has a light bulb, but if you want to go there, there's a bed there, and you can stay there with us." And he said something about that his church did this, you know, with Native children. So I didn't know what he's talking about. Later I found out it was a placement program.
Oh, okay.
But officially I did not get signed up. So I moved in with Lynn and Aline Boulder.
You were still about 20 years old at this time.
I am now 22. Well, I'm 21 then.
Yeah.
Because what happened is that when I was a junior, I turned 22, okay? And Lynn Bowler and his dad came and they said, "Ezekiel, we figured out a way that you can take your senior requirements in your junior year. Would you like to do that?" And I said, "Yes," not knowing what I was getting into. Boy, that was a rough year. And I was 22 years old. So I lived with Lynn Bowler for 2 years in that basement, and they were the kindest and wonderful people, most wonderful people I ever met. And I didn't know they were LDS. I didn't know none of them were LDS. Well, and what happened, Mr. Benel, when he likes some of my drawings, some of my paintings, he says, "Can I keep this?" And I said, "Yes." After all, he supplied the equipment and the paints and everything. And what he was doing, unbeknownst to me, he was preparing a portfolio to send out, you know, to universities. And BYU accepted me. Now, unbeknownst to me. So graduation night came, and my whole family chose up to take the front row of the auditorium because I'm the first one ever to graduate from high school. And my brothers and sisters, the little ones, are so excited, you know. And they're kind of making a lot of noise too, you know. And I'm trying to quiet down. And there was a small school, so only 24 of us graduated. So 23 seniors, and I'm a junior senior graduating. And Grant Bowler started the alphabetically wise and started calling everybody to stand up. And he said, "No, and nobody clapped till we're all done." And when he came to my name, he skipped me. Okay, so he didn't call me according to the alphabet. And my little brothers and sisters, they're right there. I can see them. They're going like this. What's happening? And I'm telling them, "It's okay. It's okay. I'm going to be okay. It's just an overlook, an oversight or whatever." But then he called the next name, and it was
past you.
Yeah. And then another one. And my little brother and sister now, they're discouraged. They're going like this. I didn't dare look at them now, and I'm now pitying myself. You know, you can get in that pitiful state where I'm thinking, why didn't somebody at least warn me? Why didn't they tell me that I had not graduated? Why would they embarrass me and my family before all these people?
Yeah.
Well, I'm in that pitiful state. I don't hear anything, and Grant Bowler, Principal Bowler, is calling my name, and this young buck on the side hit me twice, and he said, "Your name is being called." And I was so wiped out that my knees were so weak, you know, from all that emotion and
discouragement.
Through,
Yeah.
that when he called me, he says, "Come up." I was walking, shaking, you know, and he grabbed me, and he had a big barrel chest. He grabbed me, and he told my story about coming across the border, the migrant fields, just like we've been discussing this. And he said, you know, against all odds, he said, Ezekiel has graduated tonight. Not only has he graduated, but he has an art scholarship to the Brigham Young University. And I never heard that.
That was
That's
the first time you'd ever heard of it.
And my brother and sister, after the shock that they went through, they jumped up and screamed and hollered, "Yay!" And the whole audience went up with them. And that was a great night. So I found myself at BYU as a freshman. And Len Bowler and Max Bennell, they said, well, this is a religious school. He said, and people there, don't drink, they don't smoke. And I told him, but I don't do any of those things. I said, my father never did. And so I've never taken drugs. I've never taken liquor and things this and that. They said, well, do you drink coffee? And I said, yes, I drink coffee. He said, can you stop that? I said, yeah, for a scholarship, I can stop that. And so they said, well, sign this. And I didn't know what I was signing. Later, I found out what it was.
What was it?
It's the honor code. You had all signed that.
Uh-huh.
Well, anyway, so they said, well, enjoy it. Just go to church. You're there with them, just enjoy yourself. Said, you're not going to be a university student. He said, don't you worry, just go. So I started going to church. And I want to tell this story because the audience needs to know my conversion story. And I think it's important that somewhere in all our lives, we come to the crossroads where we're offered the pearl of great price, and we can accept it or reject it. And so for me, I believe that the Lord's hand was upon me, and He guided me. He guided my father to this little place called Overton, Nevada, that all Mormons there. And finally ended up at BYU. This is how it happened. My first Sunday, my roommate was a young man by the name of Jerry Sear, S-E-R-R. Jerry was from Blackfoot, Idaho, and he was the son of a farmer. And he picked potatoes. So immediately we had an affiliation. Well, the first Sunday, Jericho, I call him Jericho. Jericho said, come on, we're going to be late for priesthood. I said, priesthood? But I got up, brushed my big teeth, put on a white tie and a skinny tie that's going to be coming back in fashion. A white shirt, excuse me. And so I left the church with Jerry, and we went, and it was nothing but boys, college-age young men. And I wonder, whoa, where's the girls? Maybe this church discriminates. But then we went to Sunday school, and there was the girls. And I thought, oh, okay, I felt better about this. And then we came home to eat, and then that's when the church did not have all the block,
separate meetings.
Separate meetings. So it was, priesthood in the morning, Sunday school, and then we went to sacrament meeting in the afternoon. Well, Jerry had a great idea. He says, after we ate, he said, why don't we go next door and meet the girls? And so we did to the apartment that was next to us, because we lived right below the Botany Pond at BYU, in a little place called the Y Manor. And so what happened is Len Bowler and Mr. Bennell had found this little place that also gave boarding room. So he said, you don't have to worry. And they found me a job cleaning the Smith Field House. And after the football, we go clean the stadium. Anyway, so I said, wow, that sounds good. Let's go meet the girls. Well, the girls let us in, they were so wonderful. There was all the other young men there that had the same idea. So by the time we got done introducing ourselves where we were from, all of a sudden the girls disappeared upstairs and came down dressed. And I said to Jerry, where are they going? He said, well, we're all going. We're going to sacrament meeting. So we went to sacrament meeting, and we went up the steps to the Just Smith building, the old Just Smith building. And we went in there. And for some reason, from the very start, I liked sacrament meeting. The bishop used to say, so-and-so, will you give the opening prayer? So-and-so, would you give the closing prayer? I thought to myself, hey, one day he's going to ask me. So I memorized me a Mormon standard prayer. And one day he did call me. I went up there and I said a Mormon prayer. Up to this point, nobody knew I was not a member. I went to every meeting, with Bishop Knight, the whole Mutual, MIA at that time. And I participated. I trusted Bennell and also Brother Bowler, and I just went. They said, just go and enjoy yourself. Well, the second semester, Bishop Mark, M-A-R-C, Mark Sessions, like the session of conference, Mark Sessions called me in and he said, Ezekiel, where's your papers? Yeah, your membership paper. But all I heard was papers. And I'm thinking, because I was, I had my green card now, but he's asking, you're legal in the country. That's what I interpret. Because I didn't know anything about membership papers. And I said, what membership papers? I said, Bishop, I'm legal in the country. He starts to laugh. He said, no. Your papers that say that, that tell us you're a member of the church because we want to extend a calling to you. I said, I don't have any. And he said, you're not a Mormon? And I said, no. So obviously he visited me for a while, and then he said, would you like to know more about the church? Well, yes, because in the migrant fields, we travel with this band, but everything travels with it. You got prostitution, you got drugs, you got the whole thing. So it's like a little community.
Yeah. There's the good and the bad.
Yeah. And so when the tradition was that when a young buck turned 18, he would go and lay down with the woman in the streets to become a man. Well, when I turned 18 out in the migrant fields, they approached me with that. And I said, no, I'm not going to go. And they were so insistent that I said no. And my father supported me in that. But here now, and the dirty stories in the migrant fields and the smoke and, and all that. But I all of a sudden found myself at this institution of learning, and there's no cigarette butts on the ground. The young people, they have no foul language in their speech and no dirty stories to tell. And
those are standards you were raised with.
Yes, but I never thought that there was a people that existed like this. I had no longer that fight in my mind to keep the swell words out, the dirty stories and all these things. I could be at peace. I could walk with them. And I knew the conversation coming out of them was going to be wonderful. And so when the bishop said, would you like to know more? I said, yes, of course. So the next Sunday, there's the stake missionaries. They knocked at my little apartment door, and I lived in the basement. I call it the gopher hole. They came in, and they told me this story about this young man seeing the Father and the Son called Joseph Smith. And the Spirit, now I know, as I look back with the Spirit of the Lord, I knew with the certainty. I knew that very first time they told me a story that had actually happened. And so I was baptized with only that knowledge that Joseph Smith did see the Father and the Son. I know he did. I know it. I knew it then. I know it more now. So that started a wonderful way of life. But I need to let you know this much. When I started listening to the lessons, and I was so convinced, this is true, but I was still giving them a hard time to these elders. They were return missionaries. One of them had beautiful blue eyes. And I said, elders, I don't think I could join this church. Because at that time, that's in 1965 when I led at BYU, the church had just a few international missions, but it was mostly a United States church. And you'll have to look at your records because President McKay was the prophet at that time. And he did look like a prophet to me. But anyway, so I told him I told him about what happened in the American fields, how I had this feeling for white people, but not for them. I never had that, for the students. I just felt so at peace. But I told him, I says, I have this feeling that every time, I think about those things, I get all riled up. I says, and I was quite skinny. I only weighed about 130 pounds because when I got these feelings and they used to churn inside, I would push my food away. I couldn't eat, remembering those things. And that blue-eyed elder said to me, God can remove that for you. And I wanted that removed because I'm here with these people that are happy, they're progressing, they're clean, they're wholesome, they're wonderful. And to me, they were beautiful. And so I said, how? And he looked at me and says, I don't know how, but he can. So they invited me to fast and pray. And BYU hallways have all kinds of fountains. And so I never fasted and prayed. I've gone without food because we're a big family, but I had never fasted and prayed. And I broke my fast. So when they get back again together with me, they say, how was the fasting? Did you find out it's true? And I said, I'm sorry. I says, I drank water. And then this blue-eyed elder said to me, we'll fast with you. And I says, why? Why would you want to go without food and water for me? He said, because we love you. And this is the first time a white person told me that they love me. And I felt that. And we kneeled down and started our fast. And it was in that fast that I knew that it was true. I knew it was so profoundly true. And then I had this, that night when I was fasting, I had this, And I tell this because it's so real. We are in a struggle for the soul. Now I know and I can identify the enemy. That's Satan. Satan knew that if I would ever join the church, I'd be in opposition to him. And so that night, as I'm laying there in bed by myself, and I have had my prayers, and I knew now I was going to be baptized. And all of a sudden, in my bed, it was like I was bound. I became like a board, and I could not move. I could not get out of the bed, and I could not talk. And I wanted to scream for my roommates to come and help me. And there was no voice that came out. And then I saw a face, and it was a face that was laughing at me. And I became very afraid because I grew up with a lot of tradition, and I began to fear. And finally, I just offered a prayer, just a simple prayer, to God to help me. And I was the next thing I remember is waking up the following morning, and I knew that I was going to be baptized. So I was baptized at what was called in the Oak Stake Center in the 900 East. And the whole world showed up because they didn't know I was not surprised. Oh, no. And I went in the waters with this wonderful elder. And when he called me by name and then submerged me in the water, when I came out, he said, "Let's go change." He said, "Follow me," And I said, "Something's happening, elder. Don't move." And as they closed the curtains, he stood there with me, and I began to feel, and I feel it today, this warmth coming up. It's like, the only way I can describe it, like here in Arizona, when you're in a pool that's warm, and you put your feet, and you can feel the water coming up, the warm water coming up your body. That's how I felt this feeling. And all I can say, that it was cleansing me. And that hatred and all that I felt on there was lifted up and came up. And I said to this wonderful elder, I said, "It's gone. It's gone." And he knew exactly what I was talking about. He said, "I knew God could remove it." He said, "I didn't know how." And the Lord shows that. And I was so excited that he was trying to take me back to get dressed. And I wanted to go out and hug them because I felt such a love. And, it was consuming me. And I go out there and my suit is all wet. And I'm hugging hugging them. They're squinting and hugging me back. They're getting wet too, but they see that I'm really happy about something. And finally they convinced me to go back and get dressed. But that's how my membership in this wonderful kingdom started. I knew, and then the Lord verified it by removing that ickedness out of my breast. Can you imagine today I work with young people? If I hated them, what I would do to them out in the wilderness? But I don't. I love them. And I see them as children of God.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
So I'm glad my footsteps were led to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am a Mormon, and I'm trying to be a good Latter-day Saint. And my wife is the blessing. I call her the woman of my heart. And she helps me stay on the straight and narrow. Every man should have a wife like my wife. She is wonderful. We have 7 wonderful children.
In our next episode of Why I Believe, we'll talk with Ezekiel and Pauline Sanchez about how they met and about how they developed the Anasazi Wilderness Program that helps so many young people who are struggling with the challenges of life. You've been listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Rick Starr. Have a great day.